I have Ives' original 1861 report, which happens to be the first document to be printed by the U.S. Government Printing Office in 1861. First Lieutenant Joseph Christmas Ives, get my eyes on here, wrote 51 letters to his wife, Cora Matilda Sims Ives, while on his exploration of the Colorado River for the U.S. Corps of Topographical Engineers. His letters were written from ships, western forts, riverbanks, camps on the Colorado Plateau on the south side of the Grand Canyon. My paper on the Ives expedition was published in 2013, titled Getting History Right, the Ives Expedition of 1857-58. That was in the proceedings of the Third Grand Canyon History Symposium that was held in January 2012. This paper pointed out the first geological cross-section, the first Euro-American illustrations, and the first map of the Grand Canyon were produced in his report, 11 years before John Wesley Powell's trip through the canyon in 1869. A biography of Ives is included in my paper. Ives was not the first time out here on his own expedition. He was second in command on the Whipple expedition in 1853-54, which was a railroad survey along the 35th parallel from Fort Smith, Arkansas, all the way to the coast of California. His wife, Cora, was the daughter of a prominent Southern Maryland family. Cora was born in 1834 in Georgetown, District of Columbia, the ninth of 13 children. In 1855, in Georgetown, she married a dashing young Army officer, Joseph Christmas Ives. New couple established their home in District of Columbia, living a few blocks from the White House. After the Civil War began, Cora's husband went south, joining the Confederate Army. Cora was a Southerner through and through, certainly was a major influence in her husband's decision. We can imagine that the federal capital was not particularly welcoming place for the wife of a prominent Confederate officer who was viewed as a traitor by many in the North. In fact, the animosity extended to his entire family. Federal agents intercepted his mother's mail. 2 of his brothers were arrested on trumped-up charges of treason during the war. Cora left Washington early in the war, moved her children to Lexington, Virginia. After a few months in Lexington, her husband was by then serving in Richmond as a military aide to President Jefferson Davis. He obtained a house for them, and they moved to the Confederate capital. After the fall of the Confederacy, many senior Confederate officers left the country, fearful of prosecution or imprisonment. Cora's husband sailed to France, and Cora took her children to live in Warrenton, Virginia. Joseph returned from France within a year or two, and the family lived in New York, where he died in 1868 at the age of 40. Cora died in New York City in 1916. They had 3 sons, 2 of which graduated from West Point and served in the U.S. military, and the other son went to law school and served in the state senate in New York until he moved to Arizona in 1895. Ives' letters to Cora were saved by her and handed down to her granddaughter, Eleanor Ives. Eleanor transcribed these letters on a manual typewriter in the early 1940s from originals torn from a folio. Carbon copies of her transcriptions were provided to Ken Ives, my co-author, by Eugene Ives Malone, great-grandson of Cora and Joseph. No one seems to know what happened to the original letters. Ken transcribed these carbon copies in 2004 into about 54 single-spaced typed pages. Ken sent his transcriptions to me in 2011. Ives' first letter was written during September of 1857 over several days on board the steamship Star of the West from New York to the Isthmus of Panama. In a portion of this letter, he explains to Cora the importance of this expedition to his military career, even though it means separation from her family, friends, and the comforts of life. My appointment to the command of the Colorado River expedition is the most fortunate and successful achievement of my military life. Someday, my darling wife, you will see and feel as I do about it. Let it be your comfort now that your husband, who is one with yourself, and whose good name and reputation you should look to as the dearest possession of yours and your children, has an honorable duty gratifying to him in every way, which he would not exchange for any position to which the government could assign him. Be cheerful then, my own precious Co. Do not let yourself ever give way to glooming imaginings, but look forward brightly and confidently to the rapid gliding away of a few months, and to the time when you and your husband will both be counting the days before his return to the happy meeting, to the sweet little home where our darling little babes, and to ourselves long after the unpleasantness of this time of probation is forgotten. I kiss you again and again, and beg heaven's choicest blessings for you, my precious wife, Joe. Now, he designed and built the steamship that he was going to use to go up the Colorado River to discover how far they could navigate. And that boat was then taken apart and put on 3 boats in order to get to the head of the Colorado River. The steamship Star of the West was the first route from New York Harbor to the Isthmus of Panama. Then it was offloaded onto a train to cross the Isthmus of Panama to the Pacific side. Then it was placed on another steamship, Sonora, up to San Francisco. Then, after being there for a month or so, it was placed on a sailing boat, which went down to Baja California, up the Gulf of California to the head of navigation, to the head of the Colorado River. And I think that's the next one we're going to see here. Yeah, that's the Monterey sailing ship, and on there you see the boiler on the left-hand side being offloaded, and they put the boat back together. You saw this picture already in a lithograph, which is in the publication of 1861, but the chief illustrator for this expedition was Baldwin Mulhausen, who, after the expedition was over, he went back to Germany, his home in Berlin, and produced a whole about 46 watercolors, including this one. And this is the only one. I'll show you a couple more of those that are in colored watercolors. Let's see. They got to Robinson's Landing by December 1st, and in 3 weeks they had the boat put together and started going upriver to Fort Yuma. They arrived at Fort Yuma on the 9th of January, 1858, met his crew of about 22, and then they left the fort 2 days later on the 11th. Their steamboat was fueled by driftwood, which they collected along the banks and cut up for the steamboat. Most of them also camped every night on the banks as there was not enough room on the boat. On February 1st, they were at Bill Williams Fork. On the 11th, they were at the Mojave Indian villages. Having consumed most of their food supplies at this point, they traded with the Mojaves for corn and beans. From his February 11th letter, we are now in the midst of the Mojave villages. We have almost reached the place where Whipple's party in 1854 left the river going west. I had a long talk today with the big chief who has agreed to send one of his tribe to the fort for me. The bargain was completed only a few moments ago. It is quite late, and I have numerous letters to write. I cannot attempt to compress into a page or two all that I would say of fondness, devotion, and love for you, my own precious pet. I love you more than anything and everything in the world. God bless you, my own darling wife, your devoted husband, Joe. Let's see. This is Egelhofstein's map of the Robinson Landing to Fort Yuma. And then he produced maps all the way up to the bend where Hoover Dam is today. This is another watercolor of Mulhausen's of the steamboat explorer on the Colorado River. This is Mulhausen's self-portrait. And this is Ives and maybe Mulhausen, Ives in his military jacket. What are they doing? They're skipping rocks on the Colorado River. I love that. Okay, head of navigation, mouth of Black Canyon. It's another perspective quite different from the watercolor. And then tragedy hits. The steamboat struck a rock about where Hoover Dam is today and damaged the boat. They could not go further upstream, although they did in a skiff for about 3 days, 3 of them. Go back. The two guys on the left there are Mojave Indians that recognized Ives when he got there from the Whipple expedition 3-4 years before. And they provided guiding for the Whipple expedition across the Mojave Desert. He met them again, and they offered their services, and they were guides to take them from the part of the land portion of their exploration of the south rim of the Colorado River. Let's see. Colorado River, February 19. Another Indian leaves us tomorrow morning for Fort Yuma. And again, therefore, an opportunity offers to send you a few lines. And as before, they must be very few, for the night is far advanced, and I'm weary with the day of hard travel. I feel scarcely able to compose a letter, and yet, whenever I can, I must also send official dispatches, besides my private communications. On March 8, the explorer struck a submerged rock, and the boat couldn't continue. He writes this letter on March 14, 1858. You must know that for 3 weeks we have been living on the provisions which I bought from the Indians below. And as these were nearly exhausted and no supply near, everyone had begun to feel anxious for some signs of the mule train, which was supposed to come up from Fort Yuma. Before starting my expedition, I had sent back one of our Indian guides to inquire if any tidings of the mule train had been received. As we neared camp, feeling a great confidence in my fortunate day, Thursday, I looked forward to our arrival with certainty that he would have returned and brought good news, and probably letters. And what a charming evening I would spend reading them. I felt so confident about it as to become quite elated. I was unprepared entirely for the bad news that the Indian had got back, but none of the Indians had heard anything about the expected mule party. We had been a long time without bacon, flour, coffee, salt, and the most common necessities of food, and I thought I could eat my corn and beans with a good appetite, but most of the men were becoming sick and dispirited, as there was not much left of the corn and beans. The trouble was that although we had been able to haul the boat over rocky shoals coming up, but going down, the swift current and rapids would carry her down so swiftly that there would be a great danger for sinking if the descent of the river was attempted before the rise in water. Our position had really become dangerous. Friday was the most dismal day I think I've ever passed. I kept up a bright face to reassure the others, but on Friday evening I went to my cabin. An unprecedented cloud of dismals gathered about my heart. I had given orders to start back at all risks on the morrow, but the danger of losing the boat with little provisions, the uncertainty about the mule train, and the responsibility attending it all stared me in the face and making me feel very, very blue. So finally I went ashore just before dusk and looked at the river. The barren, frowning mountains, the dismal camp, the depressed faces rather sickened my heart. But while looking about, I suddenly spied a figure on the opposite side of the river coming up, which developed as it grew plainer into an Indian with a red shirt, and a guide at my side told it was a Mojave from below, someone who I'd sent to Fort Yuma. It was a package of letters. Terribly anxious, in a quarter hour the skiff brought him over, and he came to the bank, and I grabbed the bundle from his hand. Good news, the train is only a few days down the river and coming up safely. I took the weight from the breasts of us all, and I could now investigate the package. I got a pile of letters from Mother, Ned, Jenny, cousins, 2 from Captain Humphreys, 3 from my darling, precious wife. I spent many happy evenings, but always blessed that Friday for one. They were all nice letters. My pet's letters were like drops of gold. I was carried away from off the Colorado, 3,000 miles, and brought home. I had my darling wife talking to me in her own voice with her precious babies prattling. I had 100 things I wanted to say about my children and how proud I was of them. And now, my darling wife, I fold you into my heart with an earnest prayer for heaven to guard and protect. Your devoted husband, Joe. Well, they got the boat repaired, they went down, they met the mule train, and they started their overland journey. I'm going to have to cut a lot of this short. Let's see, where are we at? After 10 miles of weary travel, the next day, a steep ascent brought us to the summit of a table that overlooked the country toward the south for 100 miles. No place could be described far or near that gave a promise of water. A more frightfully and arid region probably does not exist upon the face of the earth. Well, they finally gave up looking for water and went south and joined the Beale Wagon Road Trail and went back to Albuquerque. Albuquerque, June 4th. Joe's last letter is dated from June 19th from Fort Bliss. He says, "This is the last letter you'll receive from me, my darling Co." He says he hopes to reach Washington by the 1st of September. Goodbye, my own sweet wife, your beloved Joe. Thank you.